the safety and peace had been taken away from us. Just like that. Just like that. And we had no consultation. The public wasn't informed.
I have a phobia of needles, and I never would have imagined in my career as a firefighter that I would be sticking needles in somebody's arm to revive them. And my firefighters are the same way.
It's ridiculous, guys. Like, there's people who can't come, there's people who want us to talk and have input on this stuff, and you guys are denying that.
Welcome to This Week Uncut, where we take a look at the week's top stories from CHCO-TV and The Courier. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth.
We begin this week in St. Stephen, where a group of concerned citizens presented to the St. Stephen Council. It comes off the back of a story I did last week, and that was a part of last week's episode of This Week Uncut.
It was a busy council week for sure. The night of the St. Stephen meeting, I was in Eastern Charlotte with Florence Mitchell covering a council meeting there that was going on at the same time. So sadly, I couldn't be at the St. Stephen meeting, but I know it was moved to the third floor of the Garsland Civic Center to accommodate all the people that wanted to attend. So what was it like being in the room?
Yeah, there was an anticipation that there would be a large crowd because at the council meeting right before, they actually had it in the Moosehead room, which is the room that council is normally in. And there were probably 45 to 50 people crammed in that really tiny room. And I joked that it was good that the fire chief, Sean Morton, wasn't there, because I feel like it might have been a code violation, the way that people were kind of crammed in there. But they moved it upstairs. They set out roughly 100 chairs, and I believe the majority of them were full. There was a handful that weren't full. So roughly 80 to 90 people at a council meeting, in my experience, is quite extraordinary, even for like a large city council meeting. The last time I saw that was when the proposed jail was going in Fredericton, and the chamber. It's a little bit different in Fredericton. In Fredericton, there's a large gallery above the actual council chamber. The only reason why you would ever be on the floor in Fredericton is if you're presenting to council. So it was a lot of people.
And on top of that, I know we had questions here at the TV station prior to. Would it be live on our YouTube channel? Because of the location change within the same building, we're outfitted in regular council chambers we have cameras set up there always. So we had to bring equipment down to film it. So it is now, if you want to watch the meeting in full, we're unable to attend, you can watch the whole meeting on our YouTube channel, on CHCO's YouTube channel, on TV as well. But if you're looking for it at ease, whenever you have time to watch it, it is there now. So we couldn't go live from the third floor, but we were there to record the entire meeting. So again, what were some of the highlights or moments that stuck out to you?
Just want to take a second first to thank both Patrick and Simon, who operated 2 cameras and 1 boom mic. And I can tell you that a boom mic is not something that we do very often. Simon handled himself exceptionally well. It was done really well. And then obviously the turnaround on that edit would have been substantial. So credit where credit is due. Great job on getting that out to the public. Some of the things that came up, you know, it was interesting because right before the Concerned Citizens Group, the Safer Communities and Neighborhoods, 2 of the inspectors, actually 1 inspector and the executive director, presented. And what SCAN is it is an act that is specific to the enforcement of property. So if a property is deemed to be what they believe to be engaged in some sort of criminal activity, primarily drug activity, I think you know, a large number of their cases are related to drug activity. They have the authority within that specific act to issue community safety warnings, to take possession of that property and issue vacating notices and termination of leases at a property that is considered vacant. But that led into the Concerned Citizens Group, and that's really where the tension started, because there were questions to the inspector and the executive director about, you know, the Starshine properties in particular. And people will remember that Starshine is a group of properties, about 20,
a little over 20
properties that have been purchased by an Alberta landlord who has all but disappeared. Although we do know, I think that the police have made some contact with Annette Pankella, so we do know that she is
in the
alive.
area, we assume,
yes.
at one point.
But in terms of like enforcement of property, they have not been able to do that. So they have boarded it. So that's where the conversation started. But really the presentation was given by Peter Fitch and Stacey Arsenault. And those are the two individuals that I spoke about last week and that you would have heard directly from last week about their ongoing concerns about 9 Main Street, which is where the shelter is. And I'm not going to rehash all of the details that we discussed last week, but I will say all of the concerns that they brought to that presentation were ones that they shared with us. And they had 3 specific asks. They want a task force with everybody involved. So there was a task force that was announced several weeks ago, I think 5 weeks ago, that is a ministerial task force. So all that means is that there are only ministers involved at the provincial level. So that's the minister responsible for housing, David Hickey, the minister of social development, Cindy Miles, the minister of justice, and who's also responsible for addictions and mental health, Rob McKee, the public safety minister, my apologies, Robert Gauvin, and the local governance minister, Aaron Kennedy. But that task force doesn't actually involve any of the communities or stakeholders or nonprofit groups. And so this group wants everyone at the table, and including the communities that are being impacted by homelessness and by shelters that are being put in reality in their backyard. The other thing is they wanted increased bylaw enforcement. And the third one is kind of escaping me at the moment, but you will hear from them and they'll be able to explain that to you. But essentially what they wanted from council was to be heard. I think the biggest challenge that they were met with was the fact that they asked 3 times to present to council, and they told us that they weren't really given a reason why. They ended up going to a lawyer to petition the council to do so, and that is what resulted in that October 15th appearance. And so they felt that drug out the process. They felt like this could have been resolved by listening to each other. And unfortunately, this situation is difficult for both sides of the equation. Municipalities have not been dealing with homelessness for a very long time, and certainly not rural municipalities.
And I think that too, what we see, and unfortunately seeing this in smaller communities, is that while we have these meetings, there's also a social media aspect of these conversations in the community that can get well out of hand, especially when algorithms factor in and people are really feeding off the negative energy online. So I do my best to take a limited amount of time in online, but nevertheless in the room you felt tensions were still quite high.
Yeah, of course they were high. And what I think is really extraordinary is there were a few moments in that meeting where you really saw the human impact of what's happening, right? Peter lives directly across from the shelter, and so he described to me instances of incredible violence of men against women, which we know is something that happens every day, but is not largely reported on. But also he talked about in the meeting, coming across people who were in the state of overdose, and then trying to track someone down to give them what is known as Narcan, which is a nasally induced drug that can reverse overdoses. And so that's an extraordinary thing as a member of the community to come across. You want to help them, but you're not really sure how. They said they went to the shelter and they said, well, we can't help them because they're off of our property. So, this is an extraordinary difficult situation. But on the other side, the fire chief, who is also the deputy CAO and is part of by law enforcement, talked very openly about the fact that he has a needle phobia, and he has been, as part of his job now, is responding to overdose calls. And he said, I've had to take needles out of people's arms. So this is an extraordinary thing. And I think that the one thing that the community can find is common ground on wanting to do something to fix the situation. This community is struggling very deeply, both, emotionally, but also, with the physical aspects of homelessness and the visible aspects of homelessness. We need to think about it from a provincial level as well, because this is their responsibility. You'll hear, we didn't play the interview with the minister last week, but he said, we need to lean on municipalities. Well, leaning on municipalities is one thing, but they have a very small toolbox with which they can operate. This has to come from the top down.
And I think it's too, as we approach winter again, I think back to 2 years ago around this time, just a few weeks down the road from now when a state of emergency was called over homelessness in St. Stephen. It hasn't gotten better since then in terms of the number of people who are struggling. And so I understand why tensions are high, but I heard people on council said as well, maybe this location isn't the right location. They're still struggling with where it should be and how the process should go.
Yeah, so we're going to let you take a listen to Peter Fitch and Stacey Arsenault as they presented some of the points that they would like the St. Stephen Council to tackle.
Family with small children simply abandoned their dream home and their life savings, and they moved away. Jason Rideout lost a commercial renter because of an altercation in his business parking lot. Robbie and Shauna Lambert have renters that want to move away from the area in spite of having great jobs. Jill Corning's foot clinic has lost customers because they won't come to the area. Jason Rideout, before the shelter went in, bought the land beside the shelter to produce 3 or 4 garden homes. The Mowers, with Mowers Construction too, were looking to create new housing projects. These opportunities have all been shut down. So more important, this is I guess what most of our neighbors would say, many of us have experienced sleepless nights, extreme anxiety brought on from real encounters, and a sense of living with adrenaline and fear for way too long at a time. There are people that have extreme trauma responses because we're living in what is, not always. Sometimes there were many quiet days during the summer, there were many quiet nights, but at any moment there can be a chaotic outburst. And the chaotic outburst can be a man screaming at a woman, the worst obscenities in our language. You couldn't have children or grandchildren nearby to hear. I have tremendous respect for the director of the lodge, the shelter beside us, Amanda DeGrucci. I'll tell you this because we have watched her get in between a man who was ready to hit a woman screaming at her, and she is ferocious. So I have tremendous respect for her. I think she is a protector of the people in her care. But she should be doing... I believe she should be the director of a better shelter in a better place, because this is just not acceptable to live this way. People have lost value in their homes, people have lost value in their businesses, people are hurting, and the one thing that it has done is it's knit us together as a group of friends and neighbors that have become friends, because we just can't believe what has happened to us. No one of us knew this would happen. It was pushed in without any public consultation, and we understand some of the reasons for that. It was it was difficult, and a solution had to be found, but then it hurts when we hear people say, "Oh, but only 5 people came to an open house." But that open house was 2 days before the opening, after a month and a half of working on the project. The property had been purchased. There was no planned consultation. So we think we are not only the victims of having to live in this zone, we're also the victims of a lot of victim shaming from people that say that we should have a better response. And we're going, we care for the people too. We do. We're hoping for something very good for them. But it's just not right. And something else has happened that I think is really important to say. I think our town had a beautiful vision. Many of us met together about 7 or 8, maybe 10 years ago. We met, over 100 people met together to try to make a dream for what we wanted to see happen here. And we wanted to be in a community that welcomed young retirees and people that would be able to work from anywhere. 1,000 new people in 10 years, that's what we said. And what has happened instead is that as this problem has grown in the center of town, it's like our vision, the vision for the town of a safe, welcoming community, has been kind of hijacked, and we're now being seen, I believe, maybe I'm overstating the case, but I believe we're being seen as a therapy community, because we're the one place in the region where neighborhood work stepped up to the plate, and then social development helped them with $3.1 million in 2024, and I don't know how much for this year. But it's a large money industry that has now suddenly, there are just so many people working for it, so many people caring, and in this, it feels like people are being told from many places, this is where you go. St. Stephen has the resources.
You know, has St. Stephen considered a request to sit at the provincial table for the new task force that was created? Number two, it's been mentioned there's been extensive work going on by our CAO with social development on shelter issues. What is the progress on that? And can you please fill us in on some of those discussions? Number three, can you give us an idea of what you're talking about in regards to the bylaw enforcement, and what are some things maybe we could expect in the future? And I'll close it off with our ask again, just so we're clear. Here are the three things that we're asking for. Number one, a public safety task force, including all parties. You've got 3 or 4 of them in the room tonight. It'd be a good chance to gather them all up. Number two, a request to the province to relocate the shelter so it's safe for both the residents of the shelter and the residents of our community. We want to help in this. We want to help. And number three, we want bylaw enforcement for the properties immediately surrounding the shelter itself. We thank you all for your time. And, he's got one more thing to say. It wasn't on our speech. You're not allowed to do that.
Just one thing to say. 2 things to say. First of all, thank you guys for the work that you do for our town. I know you take some heat, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members, CAO, Renault, and I just want to thank you for what you do. Number 2, yeah, I know it's not an easy job that you have. Thank you. Number 2, I remember years ago that I was in a conference where I heard a therapist say, he was a marriage and family counselor. He said, if people come to me with an argument and one person says, this is my position, and another person says, this is my position, there's just no way through. But if people come and they say, this is my concern, and the other group says, this is my concern, then using creativity, we can almost always find a way that blends the concerns. That's what we really want to do here. We know there's not going to be a fast change to this, and we want people to be safe through the winter. But we would love to have some kind of sense of how long we have to live like this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That was Peter Fitch and Stacey Arsenault speaking to the St. Stephen Council. And Kathy did come back up to the microphone after to say simply, if I need to walk across the aisle and start asking questions, I will do that, but I can't do something if I don't know that I need to do it. Mm-hmm. So that, I mean, this is just very symptomatic of the issue that's going on in St. Stephen. It's extraordinarily difficult. It's extraordinarily difficult for municipal governments. It's extraordinarily difficult for the community that is living through it and in it mm-hmm. and around it. And certainly there's no clear path to how we figure this out.
Mm-hmm. And I think it definitely comes from a place of a lot of people caring, and sometimes your emotions can run high with that. And I think sometimes it makes people maybe speak out of turn, and unfortunately when things are at a live meeting, they are recorded.
And we did speak to Mayor McEachern about his thoughts on the meeting afterwards.
I'd be crazy to say it wasn't what I expected. I knew what I was coming into this evening. It's a tough room to walk into. It's a tough topic. It's a challenging topic. It just further enforces the fact that there is 2 sides to this equation. We know that, and we're struggling with that. We have to take care of the whole community, and we get 2 separate issues, and each are working against each other, and it's very challenging, especially when we don't have the tools or the authority to control it. We can do things. We can harness that energy. I'm hoping after tonight, this all gets out there, and they see the citizens that did come forward and state their case. That does give me more power. It gives our MLA more power. So now let's harness that power and have those discussions. Now, I mean, we all know government's slow, but I still want to recognize the fact that I totally understand what the province's situation that they're in. And I say we are all in the situation. So we all have a part to play in this. And we're all trying to figure this out. It's not something that we're used to having to deal with, including our provincial counterparts. It's a challenging time, and it's connected to so many things. Everything we talked about tonight, even before and after that topic, is connected to this situation that we're in. So we have to keep doing those jobs well, the best of our capabilities, and then plus deal with this new issue that we have in our community. And so, again, I'm just going to take what I've found tonight after our meeting. We're going to, again, as I said, harness that energy, go talk to our leaders. I'm going to find out, why that meeting wasn't had. I mean, I recognize, I found out that the province did meet with them, or some of the members, but I wasn't at that table. Now, I'm not saying the province is going to say anything out of line, but if I'm not there to counter what's being said, they could tell them anything. And of course, and politicians love to make people feel good, right? So we need to talk about the hard learned facts and deal with it. I know it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time to deal with this. We're all criticizing about the shelter, but the shelter is only sheltering right now. There's other pieces of that puzzle that aren't happening, and that the shelter or group is struggling with, because that's not happening. If we're just continuing to provide shelter and not the help that's needed, and that's all those other arms of government have to have a part to play. Going back to the fact I understand the province's situation they're in, I get all that, but I think I know it's a lot to ask, but we have to do it here as well as everywhere else, and it's just a growing concern. And I'm struggling with it. I'm struggling with it with them. I'm struggling with everything, and we just got to keep pushing forward.
There was some really raw moments tonight, when Peter was talking about finding some people that appeared to have overdosed. Sean was talking about, the trauma that he's experienced in responding to certain calls. I mean, this is an emotional thing that people are going through, and I wonder, how you feel through this and how you think the staff are coping with kind of the circumstances that they're being dealt.
Oh, Nathalie. So there's many days that I would have conversations with Sean and our police and our ambulance workers and the stuff that they're dealing with. And even when I'm at my conference in the UMMB, this is one of the biggest topics, is we get all the staff that, our first responders that are doing this work. It's a lot on them. It's a lot. It's, they're people. And they are challenged with that. And so as a leader, I am talking with them and trying to support them the best I can with the tools I have. And and it's a hard discussion to have. When you're talking about when their main job as an ambulance driver is the narcon. That's just unheard of, and they're doing it all the time. And we're losing people. Right, it's so challenging, and so anyway, I just got to keep supporting them the best I can, and because if we don't have them, if we start losing these responders, it's going to be challenging.
That was St. Stephen Mayor Alan McEachran speaking to CHCO's Nathalie Sturgeon after the meeting on Wednesday night.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to discuss new emergency funding announced by the Homelessness Task Force for emergency supportive housing.
But we also recognize that there's community nuance in every part of the province, so they've got to come up with projects that will work in specific communities.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
We're staying in St. Stephen.
Yes, so the minister announced, actually when we were talking to him last week about our story specifically, he mentioned that there was a funding announcement coming, and he actually said it wasn't coming fast enough, and then this week, here it is. But it is $7.4 million for what they're describing as temporary emergency supportive housing. It's a mouthful. Essentially, it's not for shelters, so we can't get it confused. It's not going to homeless shelters, although the temporary part might be a bit confusing. Essentially, what they want is a similar project like Somerset Acres. So Somerset Acres in St. John is modular construction trailers that have been retrofitted into apartments, bachelor style apartments. I don't know particularly if they have washrooms. I believe that they do. Essentially, this is like, and then they have supportive wraparound 24-hour supports there that are available to them. So it is an in-between between a shelter where you just lay your head and permanent housing. And they're going to prioritize projects that are already set to go. So that raises a ton of questions for me.
Okay, and what would the first question that it raises for you be?
Well, what happens to communities who don't have the resources to plan for a Somerset Acres? What happens to the communities that want to plan a project but won't have the time to plan a project because they're managing an actual life and death crisis on the ground? You know, Neighborhood Works operates in a board of directors capacity, so potentially there is room. The minister did specifically mention St. Stephen and Bathurst, both communities that are suffering tremendously with the homelessness crisis. So it's on his mind, obviously, because, you know, we keep asking about it. And, you know, the community, from what I understand, is also advocating through the administration. Chief Administrative Officer Jeff Renaud has mentioned several times that he's been in conversations with the Department of Social Development. So I have a lot of questions. They couldn't tell me how the money would be prioritized. They couldn't tell me who would get the money first, although that was asked in a scrum, like who gets the money first, and Minister Hickey simply said, well, the team is looking at a few projects already, and I believe there was an announcement in Tracadie to support water infrastructure and housing. I don't know if that's related. I don't cover Tracadie, so it's a bit more difficult for me to dig in on those things, but there's more questions than there are answers about the $7.4 million and how that's going to play out for communities.
Okay, so where do we look going ahead to see if anything in Charlotte County is in the running?
Well, my first call was to the mayor, because obviously, you know, this community is looking for something to help them. Are they, you know, again, but it raises more questions. Are they ready to have some sort of temporary supportive wraparound services that is housing that could work that way? There's no rehabilitation facility here. You know, most people have to go to the northern part of the province if they wish to seek any rehabilitation services. It's a bit difficult to know, but I did ask him, and he was encouraged by that funding. I asked him if he thought a tiny home community would be something that St. Stephen would be interested in. He said he would have to look at the data. He'd have to speak with Neighborhood Works if they think it's something that's feasible. Where's the right location for a tiny home community? Because even when you think about like mini homes, when you think trailer park mini homes, there is a stigma that's attached to tiny homes or affordable housing or housing that is not, you know, the fancy housing that we're traditionally used to seeing. So how do you pick the right location? How do you destigmatize, you know, housing that is for people that are, you know, either in crisis or on their way out of crisis? So there's a lot of questions, but I will be keeping an eye on this, and I will be following it as they announce more things, and hopefully there's something for St. Stephen.
And I know as we've been following this, like we said, since the state of emergency declaration on homelessness almost 2 years ago now, we've been following what's been happening in the community, and we do have pushback sometimes from people who are concerned. There's also that fear, if you build it, then it will become more of a problem. So that is another concern we hear from residents often as well.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily true. I'm aware of you know, of cases where people have, you know, they've been in St. John, but they've relocated to St. Stephen because they're from St. Stephen and they want to go back home. But I don't know that necessarily people are just being, you know, trucked in because, you know, this is where the resources are, because there's actually less resources here than there are in St. John, Moncton, and Fredericton. But you'll know that that homelessness is up 200% across the province. There are 580 people in Moncton alone that are considered homeless. Now, the percentage of that is chronically homeless, which is that has been living outside for, I think, 6 months or more, is probably a little bit lower, but that number is almost 600, and that's not including the other two major cities, and it has no scope on rural communities like St. Stephen and Bathurst.
I know when we looked, again, this is 2 years ago around the time of the state of emergency, there was also a community group doing essentially a head count and even asking people, where are you from? What is your hometown? And the majority were from Charlotte County.
Let's take a listen to the minister responsible for housing, David Hickey, scrumming with reporters in Fredericton on the new funding from the Homelessness Task Force.
So, I mean, as part of the establishment of our ministerial task force on homelessness, the main effort in that is urgency, and that's really why this funding ask came together. That's why we brought the task force together, and really identified this as a key piece of the urgency we need in community, in particular, to support our fight against chronic homelessness. And the funding is targeted to community organizations who are operating, many of them of whom are operating in community already, to put together supported housing projects to house people quickly and in community in order to unlock more units faster. No, so think the main project that we'd be looking at for scope on this is Somerset Acres in St. John. So think supported transitional housing in the emergency term in order to get more units in community faster. That's why this funding is created as a larger $7.4 million pot to support more community groups to build projects. We've seen tremendous success in Somerset Acres, but we also recognize that there's community nuance in every part of the province. So they've got to come up with projects that will work in specific community.
That was Minister David Hickey.
We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be looking at transparency and Eastern Charlotte Council. Stay with us.
And with your motion, why are you trying to hide stuff? It should be open. We're the voting people. We're the taxpayers. We ought to know what's going on.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. Heading over to Eastern Charlotte, where there was also a council meeting on Wednesday night. So it was busy around the CHCO office on Wednesday because we had to divide and conquer, but we got it done. And it was an interesting meeting for a number of reasons. But first, I want to talk about that Assistant Town Clerk Chris McKinnon is leaving his job in Eastern Charlotte. So there was a big send-off for Chris, but he's not going far. You and I are going to be seeing him on Monday because he is becoming the town clerk here in St. Andrews. So not going too far down the road, and he will be stepping into Paul Knopper's old position. So not a familiar face for us, not someone new that we have to learn. So it'll be interesting to see Chris come down the road and be a part of this team. But it was a big send-off and a big loss for sure to Eastern Charlotte. He also was responsible for, he has great graphic design skills. So when they amalgamated, he created the logo that brings together land and sea, did a beautiful job with that, and he's excited to start here. So you'll be getting to know Chris on Monday. I am very familiar with Chris.
Yeah, he's going from your beat to my beat. So it's going to be an extraordinary change, I think, because St. Andrews is different, I think, in terms of, you know, the issues that are here, right? Black's Harbor, St. George, Eastern Charlotte as a whole is like really, really big. And there's, I think what you said, 8,000 residents in Eastern Charlotte. So it's going to be a real change for him to come to a smaller community. Mm-hmm. I think that has roughly
to 3,200-ish.
So
even
small.
The time, and this time of year too, it feels even smaller.
So small, but big issues. Don't forget that.
Big issues, but when you look at Eastern Charlotte, geographically it's so big too. Mm-hmm. So when they amalgamate it, and this is still, you know, when you're ironing out the challenges of amalgamating, that for Eastern Charlotte has been a big part of it. You're talking Bonny River, Penfield, Black's Harbor, St. George, it goes on. Mm-hmm. It's quite a big space. So I mean, it's been probably in terms of amalgamation, the most interesting municipal district to follow, though I understand the growing pains there have been a lot because of it.
Well, this community is not not a municipality in a traditional sense. So while St. Stephen is the town of St. Stephen, the municipal district of St. Stephen, I'm not really sure what the distinction is there, but certainly they're closer to a town than they are a village. And the town of St. Andrews in Eastern Charlotte, they're a rural community, which actually means that the government has a lot of influence over how that area actually operates. So, they don't get a municipal plan. So the reason why you haven't heard about any coverage of a municipal plan in Eastern Charlotte is because there isn't one. The government is kind of the grandparent of Eastern Charlotte. They get to decide in principle their budget, but a lot of the things that get decided locally by constituents in St. Andrews and St. Stephen don't get decided that way in Eastern Charlotte. So amalgamation was tough on everybody. I think even communities that didn't take in a lot of geography, it meant more responsibility, it meant more people sometimes, but more than that, it meant more geography. There wasn't a lot of thought. I remember doing a lot of reporting at the time about there wasn't a lot of thought given to public safety. I think the Oak Bay Fire Department had a huge kerfuffle over jurisdiction and authority and who was going to be in charge. I remember that being a very significant story. So amalgamation has been tough on everybody, and I think we're still working out the kinks.
I mean, a prime example would be the rural district designation itself. I think that they're still deciding in Eastern Charlotte where they want to tackle the idea of changing to a town status. That would change things a little bit for them, but they're weighing out what the pros and cons are, and we'll continue to follow that. That might be a decision that, with elections coming up in May, gets decided by a new council.
I'm so excited for municipal elections. You have no idea.
It's fun.
This is my Super Bowl. Okay.
It's fun, and again, we're going to be addressing that on other episodes for people who are considering running, especially as we learn about the province considering training for municipal. That could be interesting too. What was interesting at the Eastern Charlotte meeting, and it was interesting not just for the people on council, but also they get quite a large group of people that come out to watch most meetings, which I love to encourage everyone to do, regardless of where you live. Councillor Alexa Dedorakis put a motion forward to have the meetings recorded regarding budget. Why is this important? Because we don't have the same structure at Eastern Charlotte as CHCO does in St. Andrews and St. Stephen, where we have cameras in the room. So it does take extra manpower for us to go to Eastern Charlotte and record the meetings. It takes 2 of us plus a volunteer to go, and it takes almost a full day out of 2 staffers' lives to go do that. We love doing it, not a problem. But when they put a motion forward like that, it adding us into the equation, or considering your own version of technology to bring in, whether that means every single counselor brings a computer and they put a Zoom meeting on social media, on a YouTube channel. They'd have to consider that. Alexa put the motion forward, but it was not seconded by anyone. So that was interesting, given the number of people on council that, and their reasons why they didn't second it in their comments at the end varied. But yeah, it did make the public quite upset. There were a few people that got up to speak at the end of the meeting to voice their frustrations with this decision, and we'll take a listen to a few of those people right now.
Matthew Hall, Ward 4. What Councillor Dedorakis was trying to do and make the budget conversation more open and document it for everybody was amazing. I don't know what is wrong with you guys for not seconding that and following through with that, but it's ridiculous, guys. Like, there's people who can't come, there's people who want us to talk and have input on this stuff, and you guys are denying that. St. Stephen has it open. They're ahead of their budget each year, and it seems like each year, we're always behind the 8 ball on this stuff. Everything's late. There's no public output. It's all dealt with secrecy. The powers that be are always late and aren't held accountable for the wrongdoings. Something needs to be done to hold these people accountable, and changes need to be made, because this is getting too much. Thank you.
Anthony Scott, St. George, 19 Henry Lane. Most people know me. I just wanted to come and listen tonight, but with Matthew and with your motion, why are you trying to hide stuff? It should be open. We're the voting people. We're the taxpayers. We ought to know what's going on. So I'm in favor.
Wayne Avery, 101 Main. Camping season's over, I'm back. Okay, so 11 months ago, I talked to you guys about being open and transparent. And it's been 11 months, haven't seen nothing. You guys said you would look at doing it every 3 months. I'm pretty sure the bylaw for ATVs came in a lot faster than what this is going, right? So let's get our ass in gear, excuse French. Now, another thing I want to talk to you about is you guys sent a letter to my house for code of conduct that one of us in the house filed, I won't say who. You cited the complaint, the code of conduct part, and the thing, you said you did it in a closed session, and that you also stated in there on section 3G, which is about conflict of interest. That's not code of conduct. But in the letter, you said you got the complaint on conduct of a counselor, right, for code of conduct. Now, the other thing is, in your EC02, it says it will be done, any complaints, in a regular session on camera. You guys did it in a closed session, which funny, the night before on CBC News, they said that code of conduct cannot be done in a closed session, but yet you guys did it. How many have you done in a closed session, and why haven't you brought them up here in an in-camera session? So I expect you guys to answer that at some point soon. You're doing things wrong, you're not following your own bylaws, you're not being transparent. Get your act in gear. Enough's enough. The sooner you guys are out of here, the far better this town will be. As a bunch of people, I respect y'all. As a council, no way.
That was residents of Eastern Charlotte voicing their frustrations with council transparency at the October meeting for Eastern Charlotte.
This is very interesting for me, and actually, as you were texting me about what was happening, I immediately contacted my municipal expert, Lyle Skinner, who I've talked to a number of times, both on the record and off the record, about many things municipally related. He's a super duper expert, very smart, also a type 1 diabetic, so we share that in common. This struck me because I wasn't clear initially whether the meetings would be open to the public, and then that raises a bunch of other really technical questions, because there's only a very specific small amount of reasons that you could do something like the budget in a closed meeting where the public couldn't be present.
Right.
The issue with this in particular is during COVID there was a wave of needing to have council virtually. And that continues to this day. Councils are broadcasted. Although, in Fredericton and St. John and Moncton, Rogers actually does has been producing their council meetings for a long time. They're on TV all the time. But for rural councils, this really started, I think, during COVID. But it's
always if you live in Charlotte County,
that's
though,
right.
And you have a CHCO.
That's right.
Yeah.
But not every community does, and so they started using those. You'll see them. They're pods in the middle of the room, and they essentially just kind of rotate based on who's speaking. But certainly, it is a question of accessibility.
Yes.
When are you having these meetings? What time are they? Are they accessible to everyone? What if someone isn't able to come to the meeting? There's a lot of questions, and I think the accessibility question is different from the transparency question, because there was a section of that motion that said, to allow the public to participate or to provide feedback on the 2026 budget. And I was like, Okay, but are they not doing that already?
They can go in person. I mean, that's one thing to make sure we clarify, that these meetings are open to the public. You can go watch in person, and what you heard from the public is that not everyone is free at the time of these meetings. Some people work night shifts, some people have small children at home. There are a number of reasons why you might not be able to make it. I think we saw that in COVID-19 too, and you saw the number of people that you could go online and see how many people are watching this meeting. It was quite significant to see how many people were engaged. And I do think from a rural perspective, though, you're right. At this point in time, thanks to COVID, it really was this moment where everyone, regardless of city, town, had to figure out where to meet, not in person, and make that accessible to the public. So we figured that out. Mm-hmm. And the question would be, how come we can't figure that out now?
Yes, and you know, the public obviously will be able to come to the council meeting where these budgets are discussed, but a lot of municipalities hold open houses or public consultations when it comes to their budget, because really the budget is for the people. So when you're thinking about that, why are they not holding public consultations? Why are they not investing in the technology that they need to make it accessible to everyone? Because when you're not accessible, there's also an element where it becomes less transparent because people can't see what you're doing. So it is a question of how do they figure this out? Why did the motion die on the floor? And, you know, you said that they all had what appeared to be differing reasons for not supporting that. Mm-hmm. But I think as a council, you kind of just need to be ready and prepared for people to want to see you make the decisions on their behalf. That's what they voted you around that table for. And so if there's some expectation that you can do things when you don't think anybody's going to show up, that's a pretty tricky situation to put yourself in.
Yeah, I think especially around 2025 when we have technology so easily accessible. But I know that definitely there's a financial investment that comes with that.
Right, and it's not impossible for us to do these things because we did it for St. Stephen this week. Mm-hmm. But it is an extraordinary feat when you have to do it every single time. Like the only reason why we were able to do this for St. Stephen this time is because it's a very unique and rare situation where they have to move it to another room.
Yes.
So I think they have to take that into consideration.
And we are not paid by the municipalities to do any of these meetings.
That's
just
right.
So that's
and we have volunteers who give their time to go operate cameras and boom mics and all of that other stuff, which is an extraordinary commitment on the part of this community. So we're thankful for them as well. Yes. But certainly there needs to be an investment in some sort of technology.
And I'm giving a shout out to Dawson Hatt of Blacks Harbor for doing camera at Eastern Charlotte on Wednesday night too, just to give you an idea of how many people and from all over come to be a part of our team. It's very special on that end, but yes, definitely a lot of time and a lot of volunteer hours from a lot of people.
But you were able to speak to Mayor John Craig about this specific situation.
Yeah, it was definitely, I will say, like the St. Stephen meeting, tensions were high Wednesday night, not just in the audience, but on council as well. Adam Hatt, I should mention too, because I won't necessarily play that clip, but Adam Hatt, councillor representing Blacks Harbor, talked about a motorcycle accident that he was in July, a very bad one. So he's missed council. I hadn't actually seen him until this October meeting, and I didn't know. And so I gave him a hug because it's terrible to have to live through that. But his complaint was that he couldn't even zoom into the meetings. So that tells you something too. It's not necessarily just about the public, but there are circumstances when council themselves can't even make these meetings and would like that opportunity to, whether they're in a hospital bed, at home, or away, be able to partake in the decision making.
How many council meetings have been canceled because they didn't have quorum?
Right. But I actually had Mayor John Craig come in on Thursday morning after the Wednesday night to talk about what happened, what emotions were felt, and what transparency really means and where they go from here. Take a listen.
I understand some of the frustrations, and the councillors had different reasons. If you talk to different councillors, each one had a different reason why they didn't second the motion. Not everybody spoke, but the ones that did, there was different reasons for that. So I guess at this point, my job is to speak for council on this, and I guess what council wishes to do, because that motion didn't go through last night, what the council will end up doing is similar to what we did last year, is that the council will get together and discuss the budget. The budget actually will be coming in two more weeks with our first draft budget, and we're going to work on that. What usually you do when you have a budget, you try to put everything into the budget as you can, all the requests and all the projects you want to do, all the things you want, all the wish list, I guess you call it, and then you look at it and say, wow, our tax rate's going to go way up. We can't do all of it all in 1 year. So you start cutting back and making choices and what you can and can't do. Same as you do at home. You can't do it all 1 year, but you try to do what will have the biggest effect the next year. So you try to do as much as you can when you're doing the budget. So the council will sit down and try to do that process.
That was Mayor John Craig of Eastern Charlotte discussing transparency and budget meetings.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to check with what the team is doing for next week.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
Looking ahead to next week, tell me what's on your plate. I'm going to be away for a few days. I'm in Prince Edward Island for a news conference, a local news conference. I'm excited to get out of town.
The public's going to be tired of me saying this, but I do have those Artipas that are still on my desk. It feels like every time I get to open it, something else happens. There may be a possibility we head to Fredericton on Monday to cover the Premier's address. It's always better to do it in person. You get footage of the Premier, which is a good opportunity, but also you get to ask some questions on things that are relevant, and we certainly have lots of things that are relevant in Charlotte County. Hopefully we'll have some content that are available. We've got a couple of stories that were left over. I'm going to be writing about what we talked about today in terms of the meeting in St. Stephen. There's a few stories that are available there. And so, yeah, there's lots on the agenda for me. There always is.
I know. I told you there was never a dull moment in Charlotte County. I don't know if you fully believe me till you came and experienced it for yourself, but she's living it every day. And I should say, if you haven't read Nathalie's story, a long story on homelessness, what's the exact title in the Courier right now so they know what to look?
Oh, wow. She's putting me on the spot. St. Stephen Homeless Shelter sparks talk on wider impact, I think.
I've heard amazing feedback across the board, whether it doesn't matter what community I'm in. I've heard wonderful feedback about the article, how you handled it and how in depth you got while considering all the different perspectives. So job well done. It will also be in the November print edition of the Courier if you prefer to read it in print. Like I said, I'm heading to Charlottetown. I'm very excited about that. Next week on This Week Uncut, we'll have Camden Hatt from Community Living coming on as one of our special guests to talk about National Disability Employment Awareness Month. We're Lit Up Blue always on the show, but they encourage businesses to light up blue just to show their support. He's going to talk about, he wrote a speech, and you may have seen it online already, but he's going to come read it here about what it means to be inclusive in the workplace. I'm really looking forward to that and keeping it Eastern Charlotte. If you are an early Christmas shopper like I am, check this out. This is Men of the Maritimes calendar, but it's not just any Men of the Maritimes calendar. This is by the St. George Animal Shelter. They're fundraising for the new shelter in St. George. I think they're around $100,000 of the way there, and Dr. Egan donated the land for it as well.
If I don't get one of these for Christmas, I'm going to be mad at all of you.
She's got one for Christmas. Okay, this is my friend Allison Spears, Dog Bay, her husband Jamie on the cover, which I was thrilled to see. This is Men of Charlotte County, ladies. This is available at a number of stores in Charlotte County and beyond. I know it's in Quispamsis too, but you can definitely get it at the Independent in St. George, at the veterinary clinic as well, and then there's a number of other ones. I posted it on Facebook, but this goes to a good cause. We all love animals, and I really appreciate the work they're doing there.
Yes, but that you also went to Quinn House, and we went to the USFA opening as well. So there's lots of things on
There's a lot that we haven't talked about yet, and it'll be all on This Week Uncut next week. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.